I mean, I think the original story for me came when I went back to university sometime in the 70s, and everyone was very excited that there were this group of girls who, did wear a very strong French perfume, did dress up, and gave very good parties. And they sort of created a social life in the university that we didn't really have. And everyone, found them very funny and sort of liked them. And then I heard from other places that were more male dominant and grungy than my university, that there had been groups of girls like that too. So it seemed a phenomenon.
And this was back in a time when the prevailing atmosphere on American campuses was radical, and everyone was kind of.
It was a very depressing, highly political, not really social time, and also there was the transition from male-dominated universities and coeducation coming in, but women not really being integrated into a male college, but not really having any space of their own or any sort of influence on the atmosphere. And everyone became guys. Everyone were guys for a while, and these groups sort of changed that.
One of the things which anyone who knows anything about you and your films will be acutely aware of is the fact that it's been around 13 years since your last movie. You made Metropolitan, which I think was released in '90, Barcelona, which I think came out in '94. Last Days of Disco was, I think, turn of the century, '99, and it's been a long gap, and we've missed you, basically. Can you just sort of tell us why there has been this long gap in terms of getting the fourth film off the ground?
Failure, one word, failure. It started out inadvertently and became inadvertent. So I sort of felt that with the first three films, I'd taken three stories that I knew that had some sort of dramatic appeal, that had a dramatic story interest and interesting periods, the stories that I knew something about. And then I felt sort of written out in those stories. And I had a project to write a novel based on the last film. So it extrapolated a lot from The Last Days of Disco. A good publisher in New York wanted to bring it out for our Strauss. And the idea was there would be a novel to itself, not just a novelization. And that came out as The Last Days of Disco with Cocktails at Petrosian afterwards. And that took 2 years. That came out in 2000. Meanwhile, I'd lost my apartment in New York and gone to Paris to live, where at that point it was actually an economical proposition. And I thought that I could set projects up here where disco had been well received and where the film industry in sort of 98, 99, 2000 seemed in very healthy shape. So there are two projects that I got interest in. One was a memoir of the Cultural Revolution in China, a very different subject matter than what I've done. But I was interested in it because my college experience, I got on a paper very much like the Daily Complainer. It was called the Harvard Crimson. My brother was in something called the Progressive Labor Party. He was an energetic Maoist fighting with the weathermen and all kinds of fist fights and stuff going on. And his political colleagues were always organizing my unlikely roommates, and we were going on sort of protest marches with them. And through my knowledge of these groups, I got on the paper, and I became sort of too knowledgeable about them and kind of oppressed by my inner relationship with them. So when I started reading novels about the Red Guards in China in the 70s, I mean, it's just a tiny, tiny fraction of the same atmosphere, but we sort of got a whiff of it in Cambridge, Massachusetts, too. And so I was always sort of drawn to these stories. And so Red Azalea was a very unlikely project, and ultimately I think its unlikeliness for me helped doom it. And then I had an idea for a project set in Jamaica in the early 60s, and that I still hope to make. And there are many other projects, so in short, failure.
Well, not failure, but time does go by, doesn't it? Or,
I mean, I didn't feel that depressed because, for one, I was in Paris, and two, I see the big challenge, the writing of the script, and that means the script in pieces. So you're writing, and if the scenes are going well, if you think that's the hardest thing to do and the thing you worry about not doing well. You can be sort of happy while your films are not going forward because you're working on this script or you have an idea for another script, and if you're frustrated, if this project seems to be taking a long time, it's never that it's dead, it's always just taking a long time. You can work on this new idea or something. And then Damsels in Distress became the new idea of mid-2008, just as the Jamaica film was not happening. So, and it turned out to be kind of a happy writing experience. And I was back with the very good company in Los Angeles that had backed Barcelona and Last Days of Disco. It's a company that started with the movie This Is Spinal Tap. Rob Reiner was the director of that movie, and the people, his colleagues at Castle Rock, were the distributors, and they decided to form a company together. So it's had a special feeling towards different kinds of comedy. It's backed the Chris Guest films, A Mighty Wind, Best in Show, all those. And so they're very congenial people to work for, and they have a very light touch in going over the scripts. Martin Schaefer, when I turned in the script for Barcelona, I remember him saying, he basically liked the script, but he said, now about the ending. And before he finished his sentence about the ending, I decided the ending I had was just terrible. And I thought up a new ending that would work, and it's in the film. So something about the way they approach things, maybe because their company is built around a comedy director, they knew how to sort of allow you, if you had bad ideas, they would allow you to try to get better ideas.
Well, have you found it difficult over the years to persuade executives that the scripts that you write could transfer to the screen and be effective entertainment? Obviously, you've had a tough 13 years, as you've just described. But in general, I just wonder how you feel your scripts read to executives, who of course are looking to make profits, looking for a mass audience.
That's true. I mean, I usually write the scripts thinking that I'm going to direct them, so I don't have to really explain too much, or just sort of write it for others. Maybe that's a problem. And someone who ultimately said he wanted to do the Jamaica film, I'd waited for something like 7 months for him to read the script, and by then I was so sick of him. I didn't really care whether he wanted to do it or not. And he said he'd read bad coverage of it. Now, bad coverage is a very sad thing in the film business, and it's people who want to be agents when they're starting out. They get to cover scripts. So these are people who are entirely unsympathetic in their point of view and their interests, and reading and dissing scripts. So if you get bad coverage, I guess you're in trouble. But I would hope there would be companies where they actually read the script and not just the coverage.
Yeah. Do you feel as though Damsels in Distress is all of a piece with your other films, or do you feel as though it's a departure?
I feel that the first three films are very similar. They're almost like chapters in a book. In fact, we called it, when we linked the other two films in disco, we said, well, it's kind of a triptych where they're related. It's not a trilogy. And this, I see, is something different, where it has certain characteristics of the other films, but it's essentially as if the last scene in Last Days of Disco, when everyone starts dancing in the subway station, this is a continuation of that kind of fantastical point of view.